Tell me a little bit about your operation. You're a first-generation dairy farmer. Tell me how you got started.
We originally started in Wellsville, Utah with 10 head of cows. We was in an old rock barn, flat barn, and I was working at Utah State University Dairy at the time, and we started with 10 head of Springer heifers. We're milking 65 today. We have about 150 with heifers and dry cows.
And you've also got some family help here on the dairy?
Yes, my son is here with me full time, and once in a while we'll hire a part-time milker.
Tell me, one of the unique things you're doing here is the fodder system that you have. Tell me a little bit about how you came to own one and how it got started.
Well, it's been 3 years now, I guess. The hay prices around here went to about $2.25 a ton. We have to buy 99% of our feed, and the hay price was more than the milk check could cover. So we just started to look at different things that we could try or that we could look into to see if we could cheapen the feed up. And we looked at the fodder for probably a year, and my boy was at the state fair in Salt Lake, and a guy had a portable unit that he fed his goats with down at the state fair. And when he came home, he just told me that we had to get serious about it. And so we started doing some checking. There's a bunch of different systems, and then we started to work on the finance to try to get it done. And we was in the process for pretty close to 3 years before we had the building up and running.
As you looked at the different systems, what are the kind of unique things about each one, or what are, I guess, some of the decisions you might have to make if you're looking at it?
The biggest decision, the reason why we went with the system we did, is because we like the spray system rather than, I believe they call it a soaking system, where the water runs through the trays. The one that we put in is a little bit unique because when we put this one in, they had just started with this particular kind of system. They call it a slab system rather than the trays. And talking to the guy that put it in for us, he was here last week, and this one that we have actually is the only one that's been designed that way so far.
Overall, what's your reaction to it since you've been using it for a little while?
I love it. I like it. The cows like the feed. My feed prices have dropped by about 45 to 50%. We can feed different kinds of feed with it, and so we get the same feed every day out of the building, and if I could build another one just like it, I'd do it.
Tell me a little bit about the first time that you'd grown the fodder and you were feeding it to the cows. What was that experience like?
Well, when we first started, before we started with the fodder, we were just feeding long-stemmed hay outside. We still feed the commodities in the milk parlor. And so we didn't want to go full blast right at first. So we was just top dressing the long-stemmed hay in the manger. And the cows would leave the long-stemmed hay. They would fight over the fodder, and they would eat the green off the fodder, and then they would go right after the root system. And I was a little nervous at first because they would mow the green off, and then I'm thinking now, what are we going to do with the root system that's sitting there in the manger? And as soon as the green was gone, they went straight to the root system. And now they actually, if there's a chunk come out in the feed, they actually will go after the root system just as fast as they will the green stuff.
Tell me a little bit about how you do quality assurance. I mean, how do you make sure that each batch of fodder is consistent? You know, just like you would buy a big bale of hay and it's mostly consistent.
A lot of the problem that we was worried about at first is if you don't have the building set up right and everything working right, mold is really easy to get to grow on it. So, and we did have issues right at first. We worked through those issues, and now when we pull the fodder off the trays, then as we're pulling them off, we just look to see if there's any mold on the feed. If we do get a mold spot in them, then we just toss that out and don't feed. But as we pull the fodder off the slabs, we just check and make sure that there's no mold on them. And since we got the ventilation in the building figured out, we really haven't had a mold issue after that.
What a lot of dairy producers will say when they hear about these systems is, that sounds great. I like the cost savings. I'm not sure how my nutritionist is going to feel about this. Tell me how that conversation went and how that's been evolving.
Well, I have a really good friend. We've been friends for 25 years. I went down before we built the system and was talking to him, and I told him what I was going to do. And he says, no, it won't work. So in the process of getting the finance, I just kept telling him that I'm doing this, you figure out what's going to take place. Mm-hmm. And so he looked into it and kind of checked, and when we got it going, he came up and looked at the fodder. And as soon as he looked at it, then he got excited about it, took some samples, and I don't know what kind of tests he run on it. I mean, that's his business. I haven't really worried about that too much. But he did tell me that he run a different kind of test rather than just straight dry matter, because it's about 85% moisture. And so when you talk to all of the nutritionists, they say this just isn't going to work because there's not enough dry matter in it. At first, our plans was, when we built the system, it's called a 2-ton system, and we're actually getting between 4,200 and 4,800 pounds a day out of the building. And so I told my nutritionist, I said to Mike, I said, so figure out how I can feed all of this fodder a day. But what we found with feeding that much fodder, and the nutritionist is fine, Mike's fine with it, we have to feed about 10 pounds of straw a day per cow with the fodder to get the cows to react to the fodder the way we wanted them to.
Just walk me through, you said you've got 2 to 3 hours worth of labor into the sprout system every day.
When we first go out, of course, we pull the fodder off the trays. That normally takes us about 15 minutes. And then the system that we put in just has aluminum sheets on the slabs, they call it. And then when we put those on, we decided that we needed to divide it up into 4 sections so that we wasn't trying to pull a 400-pound piece of fodder off. Mm-hmm. And the biggest drawback to my system right now, and we're still working on this, is those roots, wherever there's a crack, those roots will get in. And so we normally spend about an hour a day, an hour and a half a day, in making sure all of the dividers, we call them, all of the dividers are cleaned underneath. And then we spray the slabs off, and then we will spray the slabs before we reseed with a bleach solution. And then normally we let that sit on the slab for about 10 minutes. And then we'll rinse that off a little bit. And then to reseed, it normally takes about a half hour to 45 minutes to reseed. And we do all that with a wheelbarrow, and we do all that by hand.
Tell me a little bit about the type of seeds that you're sprouting, and have you changed seeds, or are you pretty much stuck with the same variety or type?
All we're doing is just the straight barley right now. With barley in our system, we can plant one day and 6 days later we take the feed out. So we've just got it on a 6-day rotation. That's why we do the barley. We plant 12 pounds of seed a day per tray, I call them. So each slab takes about 48 pounds of seed, and 6 days later we're pulling about between 400 and 450 pounds off of each slab. This summer I just bought barley off of a farmer. We thought he had enough to get me through. We've run out, so now I'm just buying just regular whole barley from the co-op.
What's the climate controlled conditions inside the building?
We try and keep our building at 68 degrees year round. We tried at 70. The fodder will grow a little bit better at 70 degrees. You will get a little bit more growth on it. But that's when we found that the mold issues was really easy to contaminate the building. So we experimented a little bit with it. We cut the building down to 66 degrees after that, and the fodder didn't do near as well. So we took the building back to 68 degrees, and we found that the fodder grows fine, and we don't have to worry near as much about the mold issues at 68 degrees.
Costs for water and heat, how do you estimate, is it per ton, or what would it cost to?
They told me when I put the system in, and I have not measured, but they said it would use about 600 gallons of water a day for my system. When we run the air conditioner last summer, the electric bill, it all runs through my dairy barn, and the electric bill increased about $150 to $175 a month. And the winter months we run on propane, and we go through approximately 350 gallons of propane a month. For, I'm guessing, this is the first year that we've gone all the way through the winter, but I'm guessing for about 4 months out of the year we would go through between 300 and 350 gallons of propane. This year we're lucky because the propane is only $1.50 a gallon. So we're looking at, in the winter, about $450 a month to heat the building.
You said it saves you 40 to 50% on your feed cost, and you'd feed more if you could. If you were going to feed more, how would you do it?
The nutritionist told me, Mike told me, that if we fed more fodder, then, and everybody says I can't get 50 pounds or 100 pounds a day of feed into the cows, and we haven't had any problem. Mike said what he would do is adjust the hay side rather than the straw side to accommodate the extra fodder.
So explain for us how you actually feed the feed. It's in the facility, and then it's got to go get to the cows. How do you go from the facility to the cows?
And when I built the building, I built it specifically so I couldn't get equipment into the building. And I'd done that because every building that I see that's built that you can get equipment in, it's always dinged up. So I just decided when we done this that we wasn't going to take the tractor into the building. So all we done is just made a metal cart on wheels, and we take it into the building, and we can pull about half of the feed out at a time. It fits on the cart. We wheel the cart out of the building, and then it's just got a quick attach on to the loader to the tractor, and then we can dump the fodder into the TMR box, into the mixer box.
What stage of the mixing process do you put in? First, last, middle?
We normally put all of the dry feed in, and then we put the fodder in on top of that. And we've got the old feed box that's the augers. It's not the vertical mixer, and it seems to, if we put it in on top, then it seems to mix in a lot better doing it that way than trying to get the fodder in first, then putting the dry feed on top.
Tell me what kind of farmer you would recommend this system to or suggest it might be a good idea for someone to look into.
When we first built this and the cost of it, everyone says to me, are you sure you want to do that? Because the system isn't, I mean, it's not cheap. But what I told everybody when I built mine was that my building cost about as much as a new 3x3 or half-ton baler, I call them, would cost. And I also told them that when we build ours, that if I was raising 75% of my own feed, that I probably would not have looked at the system, because I don't think it would have been cost efficient. But I think if a guy is only raising 50% of his own feed, and that's on his own ground, not rented ground, but his own ground, he has enough to raise more than 50% of his feed, then I don't know if the fodder system like I put in, if it would pencil out. I think it's very easy to pencil it out if you're buying over 50% of your feed.
What do you figure is the return on investment for your facility?
We figured that if we could take everything that we're saving on feed and just hurry and pay the building off, that we would be about 24 months paying the building off. And that is, that's going to vary a little bit, because when we figured it, we were figuring it on the cost of feed, which would have been a year ago. And of course, over the last year, feed has softened up a little bit on the commodities part. So if you take that all into account, I think realistically, I think a 3 to 5 year payback would be very easy to do.
Do you think the fodder system could ever scale for a large operation, say one that has 500 or 1,000 cows?
If you had a way to automate one of the buildings, I think there'd be a lot more people feed the fodder. The building that we have normally takes us about 2 hours a day, 2.5 hours a day, to take the feed out, wash the racks, and reseed. Part of the thing that I heard when I was building mine was about the labor cost. The labor cost to do this and to do that. I did have a good friend that was talking to a guy about it, and he said, I would love to put one in, but I don't want to hire more people to take care of it. And my friend says to him, he says, well, how many people do you hire in the summer to help take care of your crops? He said, basically, you would just be doing a switch. I think if they could get one automated, I think they could build a system that you could feed any amount of cows you wanted to.
If you had to do the decision all over again, would you make the same decision to put the building in?
When I get this one all paid off and going, I would consider very hard in putting another one in just the same size.